Thank you for joining us on Perspectives with Asima Silva. As always, we are coming to you from the studios of WCCA TV on Main Street in Worcester, Massachusetts. And today, we're going to be talking to someone who has begun the Gavel Club. And what is the Gavel Club? Well, she's going to tell you all about it in just a moment. Asima, the good doctor who is joining us, incredibly distinguished. And as with our guest last week, one of the things that I think is going to jump out is the involvement in the community, in the way in which people are able to bring other community members into what it is that they are doing, to be part of the very fabric of the community. And I think that as we've done the shows, such a large part of people's success is in being part of the fabric of the community. And our next guest is no exception.
Exactly. And I had asked her to give us a bio, and if I read you the amount of awards and her accomplishments, it would probably take most of our 28-minute episode. So I'm going to skip over that. So I suggest you look her up if you're interested. This is Dr. Manal Fakhoury. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, you did great.
And one of the reasons we invited her, we had talked about how there was an event about honoring Muslim women in social entrepreneurship. And she was one of the women who spoke at this event. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend it, but what I decided to do was ask if she could come onto our show so that we can all benefit from the work she's doing. It's really interesting from what I am seeing, and I will read her introduction to this event. How they described her was a handwritten letter from an inmate began a project to coach, mentor, and train thousands of inmates with compassion. And it's the story of the Gavel Club and how it has helped prisoners successfully re-enter society. So I will now just give the floor to Dr. Fakhoury to talk about what her work is regarding the Gavel Club. How did you start it? What is it? What motivated you? So please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I was excited when I received your email request to be able to share one more time about our amazing program that exists and has the potential to be duplicated all around the world. And I'll start by saying there's an organization known as Toastmasters International. And of course, when we hear the word international, we need to be thinking global. It's all over. It's approaching its 100th year anniversary. It's been around for a while. Something I share with my friends is if an organization has been around for 90 plus years, they probably figured out how to do things and do them well. And in the late 40s, I think maybe even close to 48, they established a program, the same program, the Toastmasters International, which is dedicated to communication and leadership skills. So generally there's 2 tracks. And the idea is that it's to give every one of us confidence to speak, the eloquence and knowing. And I will say to my friends, people will equate your intelligence to how well you speak. Right. And if we want to even ever persuade someone, as a speaker, we tell you that what do you want your audience to think, feel, and do when you're done speaking? So all of that comes from lots of practice. It's like riding a bike. However, it's not something that you learn and you just forget about. You definitely want to be sharpening your skills. So in the prison and for marginalized communities, this organization, Toastmasters International, started the Gavel Club. And in my drawer here, let me see if I can quickly find it, I have it right here. Is my gavel. So you know when a judge hits the gavel, might say to the inmate as an individual, 20 years in prison. And what I love, and I think where I got the idea to say that is because a local magazine did a story about the Gavel Club, and they captioned it, "Taking Back the Gavel." And it really was reflecting, and what they were highlighting is all the great work and the positive impact that the club makes for the men behind the bars. So in my case, I had been involved in Toastmasters International. I recognized that I needed to be a better speaker. I wanted to be that speaker that you would stand in the rain to hear you speak. So that's my ultimate goal, to be that great. And so I had invested some years sharpening my own skills and learned about this idea that you can actually have a Toastmasters in the prison. So it was just an idea, something I'd heard about, I didn't know very much about. And in 2015, I received a letter, super busy. I recall it so well because I was getting ready to travel abroad for 2 weeks. I was just trying to get my bills paid. The one letter caught my eye. It was hand addressed. It was rubber stamped, mailed from a correctional institution. My first thought is, I don't know anyone in prison. I was intrigued. that busy that I said to my daughter who's standing next to me, can you please read this out loud so I can continue to pay the bills? And then as she starts to read, she gets to the part where the gentleman is saying, you don't have to come in, just be our sponsor and send us one manual. And it really touched me. So I stopped what I was doing, like my hands came off the keyboard. And she knew she had my attention, my daughter. And I picked up, called the prison chaplain to explain about the letter. We scheduled what we call a demonstration meeting, a demo meeting. Then I started appealing to my Toastmaster friends. And what was awesome is I actually went on my trip, came back. And when we had that demo meeting, there were 10 of us. 10 of us showed up at the prison gate. And we were quickly sent back to our cars, no cell phones. And that was something, of course, we walked up with our cell phones. And then we were led into a room, 60 men in blue and white uniforms, giving us a standing ovation. And I remember, just thanking them all. They made you feel like a rock star, truly. And I asked, well, who's Lenny, the guy that wrote the letter? And this young man, white guy, 35 years old, full of tattoos, kind of waves. And it was a really neat story, and it resonated within the institution because he had been doing this for 2 years. He'd been handwriting these 3-page letters and praying that somebody would get a letter and somebody would care enough to come in. So for myself, when I heard the letter and then received it, it just was instant for me. I didn't hesitate, and I just knew I was getting ready to leave, and I had to have that 2-week span of time. And really, the club was amazing. There was a waiting list, even with 60, that's a large club. You want to have a club about 30 people so that everyone has a role and you're rotating quickly. So in our case, we had the 60 men that became members. We had a waiting list. And then we ended up multiplying. So we had, this was at a work camp. So, and generally the way the prison system works, you have the main unit, and then you'll have a work camp. So the work camp are the guys that get to go work a few hours and they have to come back and they're in prison. It's kind of closer to their release. And then, so the main unit heard about it and they asked us to start a club. And then, there's over 1,000 guys in the main unit. So that wasn't enough. So then we started a third club, and pretty soon we were in the women's prison. Then we had gentlemen that actually ended up being transferred and wrote letters. And so then we were in different counties. And it just continued to grow. And the other part, Asima, that was really rewarding is I could see, and the other volunteers could see that, people that were really serious about resetting their lives, and they themselves are interesting in that they tend to find out about what I was doing, what the other volunteers were doing. And there was a time early on when they said, you volunteers, you guys get to go home. We sit here, we talk about you guys. And so they started, and I guess somehow through their parents or families, just knowing a little bit more about even my work without me telling them. So they realized that I had a leadership institute, and I do this youth leadership conference every year that I love. It's the top level. It's one of these conferences that we say it's the conference that will motivate you and inspire you and change you. And they asked me if I would do a 2-day a conference in the prison. So we got that approved. So that conference, then we started doing the speech contest between the different clubs, and that was really great. And it was the Battle for the Gavel. They always come up with these great titles. So the Battle for the Gavel. Then we had the debate behind the gate. So then we did a whole debate thing. We tried to emulate TED Talks. We had Sage Talks because we developed a 7-day-a-week personal development program that we titled Sage. And what was really nice, and I think why it was so successful, is I had several men. It was almost like having a board, and they were in charge of working with the education coordinator in the prison, so an employee, and they would basically do the orientation. I was always working on the outside. So if I met you, Asima, and you were an engineer, or you were in real estate, or you were a therapist, I would say, hey, would you like to come as a special guest speaker when we had one night a week that was a special guest speaker series. So that was actually a smart and fun way for someone that couldn't commit to doing a 10 to 12 week class, that they could come in one time. But what happened is almost always that guest said, I want to come back. I can teach XYZ. We had a travel agent, and she started teaching them all the ins and outs of travel. We've taught art, we've taught humor. So we call that class humor or LOL 101. So that was the name of that class. We've done real estate classes with them. Restorative justice was amazing. I'm telling you, seeing them really cry and go deep into their emotions and feelings in this whole restorative process. So that was amazing. But that's what it's continued to lead from one thing to the other. There was conversation before COVID came. One of our next steps was to create a dorm for these high achieving men. And something interesting that I learned in the prison, if you get in trouble, you actually go into jail in the prison. So they have what they call the box. So you can actually get in trouble while you're in prison, and then they basically put you into isolation. So lots of learning, lots of just feeling and connecting. And very often, some of us would say, we feel safer when we're in prison than we do when we're outside of the prison. But that's kind of in a nutshell what our journey has been. Other things that I could probably have taken away is just each of us volunteers have become way better Toastmasters. In the free world, as they call us, we have these Toastmaster clubs. Very often you'll have people that will not show up or they'll cancel at the last minute, and they have a primary role. They're a speaker for the day. And what we learned and what we saw in the prison is that even our mission statement for this organization, it's a mouthful. Those of us that volunteered in the prison, we memorized it because they memorized it. But almost if you visit, and you can look up Toastmasters International, and it's really easy. You can visit any club. That's the way you're supposed to start your meeting, with the mission statement. And most people don't. They have to look at the agenda and read it. Excuse me. But we memorized it because of them. So that was great. And then, of course, the efficiency of how they run their meeting, how serious they are. They started earning awards. And the leadership, in terms of the leadership track, because there's communication and leadership. And it was really nice to teach them that, for example, if you're the president of the club, the skills that you will gain can be applied and transferred to these skills. I'm getting a little bit of a cough, so excuse me for 1 second.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is an amazing story so far, of course, and how incredible that there was the one inmate who really got the ball rolling and started this, and had the belief to just kind of keep it going. Boy, you want to follow his story and know where he ends up.
Where did he end up? That's what I want to know. How was
great question. And frankly, because of COVID, so last March, and it was interesting because even when COVID was first starting, they started to ask us a few questions before they would let us in, like, have you had a cough? Have you traveled? Have you had temperature? And we still were going in. And then it just got stricter and stricter. And then they had to, basically pause our program. So we're going back tomorrow, Saturday. We're going back. And his name was Lenny, the gentleman that wrote the letter. And what was cute about this whole Lenny story is I think it will live in that prison, because a lot of the guys know the Lenny story. And we were so blessed because when we came in right after he sent that letter and we connected, because we had one of the best wardens. She was very supportive, and she would tell the guys, this is your home right now. You want to take care of your home. And then the prison and after even she left and we had a new warden, they were measuring what the guys were doing. So some of the things, for example, like I would say to the men, when I come here and I walk on, I feel like I'm walking on a college campus. And it's a private college campus. That's why you're all in the same uniform. And so they would appreciate that. And really, it's a mindset, and that's the opportunity for them to think of themselves. Basically, this is a time for them to reset their lives. It's almost as if it's an intervention for them to take it seriously and use that time to maximize what they can get out of this experience. And of course, you have some of the guys that are serving life sentences. And what was interesting about that segment is, really, I think what I loved is that they weren't giving up on hope. They didn't give up. They were always trying to learn, are there ways, could there be something introduced that would give them some kind of relief? Because it's considered an act of grace, clemency. So that is, really just, what the experience that we've had with the men and just the organization and really the creativity that has come from them. It's been just a solid program. We have been asked to, I'm trying to remember the word that they called it, it's blanking out, but basically to license it, to license the program so that it can be duplicated in other prisons. So the Gavel Club itself, which is the public speaking portion, and I will tell you, the guys, when they open up, I think that's part of the healing. And from there, we were completely organic. Right now, it's completely volunteer driven. There's no, payment of any type. Is just completely run by the volunteers. And so I work on the outside to bring in and set up the program, the educational portion. And then I have the guys inside the prison that help me in making sure that the communication is happening when I'm not there.
So this is interesting. So when I first heard, and I guess my preconception of Gavel Club inside the prison, that it was going to be about people learning to express themselves better, perhaps express themselves in front of the judge or in front of somebody that they are going to maybe be getting a job from. But you've talked about people who are in there for life, and yet who are trying to become learners. What do you see as the ultimate goal of it? Is it to make their life better in prison? Is it to help them in the free world?
It's all those things, but I think the moment that was so meaningful for me is when I asked Lenny, you didn't have a keyboard to type on, you didn't have an audio recorder to dictate it to your handwriting, 3-page letters after 2 years, why? And you know what they said is, when we're in Gavel Club, we forget we're in prison. And I think there's if you stop and think about that phrase, we forget we're in prison, it's basically we feel human again. And there's even tomorrow is Saturday. So one of the clubs that we had, so the very first club that we started with was a Tuesday night club. And it was really neat because Tuesday night became everybody's favorite night of the week. And my husband knew, if he wanted to see me on Tuesday night, he had to come to prison. And my husband had never been to a Toastmaster meeting. But once I started doing Toastmasters in the prison or the Gavel Club, he started to come from time to time. And it was really nice. And I liked that for them to know and to meet him as well. And we've mentored some of these guys that have EOS, or end of sentence is what EOS means. But yeah, so back to, it's all those things. And we've received, wonderful testimonials from guys, where to help them to present their case when they have that chance to speak about and to present in front of the judge. So that's been rewarding. We've attended some weddings for some of the guys. My mantra to them is always do the next right thing. You just remind yourself, you make sure you're always doing the next right thing. And so there's a few phrases, when they see me, they'll as I'm walking, they'll say, the next right thing, always do the next right thing. So it's been, again, just a really heartfelt, rewarding experience. And so often I think people forget, they think that, you're just a loser, but really it's just you've had a misfortune. It could happen to anyone.
I know this is going to, I was just going to say, this is one of those where it sounds cliched, but it changes the people who are doing it as much as the people that it is for.
Right. Learning all around. But this is your volunteer work.
Correct.
And what do you do as a day job in your day life, apart from all of this other work?
So I am one of those really, truly blessed individuals in the world. I recognize that. By education, I have my doctorate in pharmacy. I went to the University of Southern California and then continued on, did a clinical residency at Shands Hospital. And what was interesting, I did my residency. It's I got married, went to my honeymoon. The very next morning, I started this residency. I ended up, becoming, pregnant as I was completing the residency. So I was hired for my very first job as a clinical coordinator when I was 8 months pregnant. And this is in 88. So you can imagine who would hire someone that's 8 months pregnant. But what was really neat about my position as a clinical pharmacist, and especially coming from California and from one of the best universities, the University of Southern California is the school that started the entire doctoral program, is I was able to do tasks and implement programs that translated truly to millions of dollars of reimbursement, for the hospital, whether it's the Joint Commission accreditation for the hospital, or it's the medication errors, the drug utilization reviews, are we keeping our costs down? How are we studying how the patients are doing on these drugs? So it was completely clinical. And it was before we even had computerized data entry for patients. I imagine this, when I was hired, there was no internet, there was intranet. So the National Library of Medicine came around before. So a physician that wanted to know the incidence of a drug interaction and this disease state would write a request, and within 48 hours, I would do my Medline search and I would provide the results for the physician. And imagine, of course, through the years, once we all had the internet, anybody could, on our fingertips, correct? We can all search all this information. So that's how it started. And I really love pharmacy, and it gave me the flexibility. I have 5 great children, beautiful children, and they were 2 years apart. So there was a time, it was very stressed, hectic, for a mom with 5 young kids. So my position at the hospital, they were really flexible. And imagine hospitals are open 24 hours. So I could go in really early one morning and get caught up. I just really respected my work. So I didn't have, I basically set my own hours. I just got my work done. And then as time went on, I really took to the public speaking. I was very involved in the community. Even in high school, I actually was super involved. I was my student body president. I just loved learning. Like, that's my thing. I guess if I was going to describe myself, is I love life and I love doing things. So, if we are friends, I would share with you very privately that in my high school, they made a rule that you cannot be president of more than 4 clubs at the same time, because I was president of 5 clubs. But it was just so I've always been very active and very engaged. And then I got involved in Junior League and the United Way and YMCA. I'm currently chairing the American Heart Association Hot Walk. I do love serving, and I believe there's always an exchange. You're always learning. And so that's been really my mode. So what I do, I also now, with my husband and I, he's a chiropractor, has a very successful medical practice, but his career has been private equity in Silicon Valley. And I was recently, just beginning of the year, January, I was named as the CEO of that company. And so that's an amazing company where we've been able to bring people along to successfully invest, to reduce their risk. It's that inverse risk reward, and aligning ourselves with the best in the industry and really understanding how to reduce your risk and have a much higher upside. So that's something now that we do together, and that's part of also my daily activity.
Well, and everybody clearly has been very positive from the warden. You're going to try and roll this program out nationally, or at least let it be a national model. But we live in America, and I've got to believe that there are some people in the community who have probably said, what are you doing? These guys are in there to serve their time, bread and water, and the part where you talked about the hole or the box, that's the part that I want to hear more about. Have you gotten pushback from people who they just look at prison as a punishment, and they're not looking for somebody who goes in and gives these guys a respite from their lives, so that they think that they forget about being in prison for a while?
Yeah, and also when we think about some of these individuals in terms of what their life was like, for one of the comments, one of the guys said from the leadership conference, he said, I've never been in a leadership conference. He just stood there and thought, I wonder what my life would have been like if this is what I was being introduced to. I do a lot of Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins, if you know or don't know him, I love what he teaches, a lot of his educational material. And I've taken a lot of that material in there. It's the whole idea of the 6 human needs, or the 3 steps to a breakthrough in terms of, mastering different skills. He does a lot of the NLP. And a lot of these guys, I was able to even get material donated and approved to be brought in, and they're teaching that material to each other. So that's the other great partnership, is seeing them progress to a higher level of leadership. But you're right. It's changed many people's minds. It's changed our mind and gave us a completely new perspective. So, there was this curiosity, I think, at first. And I said, when we showed up, we were all ecstatic. The prison guard wasn't ecstatic like we were. But many of us realized, and we connected with them, just, human to human. It was us and the volunteers, just doing good work. And it was the men, they had their group. And again, I think the creativity, I saw that from my volunteer team. They also was wanting to do new things for the men, and how we could, offer new programs, workshops. And then the guys themselves would come and present ideas to me. So for example, when they wanted me to do the leadership conference, it wasn't me saying to them, let's do a leadership conference. It was more like, hey, Manal, we know you do this. Would you do it for us? Another interesting thing, and they teasingly call it inmate.com, in that they have a way of knowing what's happening outside those prison walls. So they knew when I started my women's nonprofit. I have a women's group called All in Women International that was started in January 2018. And our motto is to take the cliche out of world peace by transforming the way we see each other and interact with each other. So it's a women's peace building group. And important to me, and where that all came about is, when you're Palestinian, growing up in this country, understanding what the situation is like still there, and knowing that people can't really connect with Palestine because of just whether it's PR or the lack of PR or a strong lobby for, Israel, is that you also have to be able to show the other side. So if we can get people to just care about humans, take away the labels, and I think you could see about the injustice, and you can care, and you can create a difference. And another principle is knowing that change never happens until it becomes a must. And I just felt like not the first time, but for sure, women were being called to take a step forward. It's like, it's almost as if everyone was saying, do it. Like, if you guys are serious, go ahead and do it. Step up. And I just, believe it's, it's that multiplication of effort. It's not going to be one specific item. It's everybody's hard work that will change the status quo.
I think she kind of summarized the whole concept of this show. So, which is exactly what you said, giving out the perspectives and the stories that you may not hear, so that we can have a greater understanding of everyone. But I think, Hank, I know you had a question before. Did you want to ask?
No, I think we're rapidly running out of time, so I just want to make sure that if there's ways in which we can find out more about the Gavel Club or aid in spreading it or getting it out in other places, make sure that we have time to be able to do that, and for your perspective.
So would you like to share how we can people can look you up and look at the work you're doing and maybe participate?
Yeah, looking me up, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. Those are the main two that I use. And of course, my name is Manal Fakhoury. But also, my website is myfly.com, and fly is FLI. So myfli.com is another way where somebody could message me. But the Gavel Club itself, also another direct way is to go to Toastmasters International. And you could Google Gavel Club. There's not a lot of information about it but there is some, and you can actually start. But I'm happy to help anyone that has an interest in replicating this program in another state or another city. I'll be happy to connect with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to be wrapping up the show. Again, what a great perspective. I, to be honest, personally learned more. I don't think I would have ever thought of this kind of idea, working with prisoners and seeing their perspective and the way they've seen just a little bit of respite with a little bit of help from volunteers. I hope you guys look up this particular club and participate. And please join us again on Perspectives with Asima Silva.